This is one of those videos I really don't want to make, but I've been having a lot of experiences that I wanted to share. As you've probably seen, I've been using Fable a lot. Sadly, Anthropic restricts the hell out of your subscriptions, so you kind of have to use it through their interfaces. In this case, Claude Code. I've been using Claude Code a lot the last couple days, probably as much as I used it back in December and January when I first got addicted to Opus 4.5. I've been through it with Claude Code, to put it lightly. And while there are lots of things I do not like about it, especially the desktop app, I have come around to a handful, and I've even found a bunch of small things that I think Claude Code does better than every other harness and CLI for doing agentic coding. I can't believe I'm doing this, but I think I have to. We're going to do a video about the good parts of Claude Code. I think I need a hat for this one. Let's do this. And as a reminder, just because I have a hat and I have convinced a lot of people to spend a lot of money on Anthropic, they are not a sponsor. I don't think they ever would be, considering some of the things I've said about this company in the past. But I do need to get paid, especially after the 7 subscriptions that I've activated for myself and my team over the last few days. I'm $1,400 down, so please pardon me for getting a little bit of money from today's sponsor. Hey you're probably a real dev, right? Like the type that uses Docker? Well, if you are, you're wasting a ton of time. Almost all Docker users are. At least all of the ones that aren't already using today's sponsor, Depot. These guys are the kings of Docker. They made it so much faster that it feels unbelievable. Up to 40 times faster for real-world use cases. Their infrastructure builds containers remotely, works for Intel and ARM CPUs, so you Mac people are going to be more than set. And they also built their own fine-grained caching for the layers for your Docker images on their own CDN. What this means is that after one dev runs the build, everyone else just pulls the cache instead, making everything absurdly fast. And this isn't just good for running builds on your machine. This is incredible for agents that are doing work in the cloud, but more realistically, it's incredible for CI, which is why they provide GitHub CI that's up to 10 times faster than GitHub Actions. If you're willing to move to something a little different from GitHub Actions, their CI engine is so much better. Not only does it handle actual parallelism, where it does one step like installs and then has 3 things running at the same time, which is unbelievably useful when you're doing real CI work. It also runs way faster on much better infrastructure, and most importantly, it's accessible via API and CLI, so your agents are able to run your CI in a loop without having to push up the changes. No more filing PRs just to trigger CI to see what works and then copy pasting the errors back to your agent. Just let the agent run. If this ad was longer than your Docker builds, get that fixed at soydev.link/depot. So what the hell am I doing making a video about good parts of Claude Code? Well, as I hinted at the start, I've been using it a ton, and I've noticed a handful of things I actually really like. From cool UI touches to nice features that only exist in Claude Code, to deep integrations with things like their skill management that are actually quite good. And I'm mostly making this video not to glaze Claude Code to convince everybody to go use it. I'll be transparent with my goal here. I want every other harness to steal all of these things. I am making this video not because Claude Code is better and I want everyone to appreciate how great it is, but because I want everything else to take the good parts so that I don't miss Claude Code when I use other things. So knowing that, what are those things? First and foremost, I want to talk about skills. You might be confused because skills are a feature in pretty much every one of these harnesses now, and they are. They're just markdown files, right? Mostly, yes. But this is where I start to really like what Claude Code does differently. One of the things Claude Code does really differently with their skills is the ability to execute scripts in them. This might sound insane, right? Like, just tell the model to go execute the script, but hear me out. There's a lot of use cases where it's nice for the model to know things when it loads the skill, instead of having to load the skill and then do things and then do the next step. Here's an example of a real skill I made that I use all the time. It's Repo Explorer. This is my markdown file that replaced Ben's whole product that he was building, that I was trying to convince him he doesn't need to build that product. Now he is convinced he understands, but at the time, this was originally a demo, and I've actually found myself using it all the time. The point of this skill is to allow agents to explore implementations of dependencies. Like if I'm using Effect or React or some weird open source project that the model doesn't know that much about, instead of just hunting through the docs and hoping it finds the right thing, this skill allows the model to clone the open source repo into a specific directory and then explore that specifically. It has a pretty simple description. Clone and inspect external repositories in a reusable local exploration cache. Use the skill when the user asks to explore, inspect, investigate, compare, or answer questions about a repo that may not already be in the current workspace. The actual skill itself is pretty simple. Use this skill to explore repos without cluttering the active workspace. I have the specific directory on my computer. In my home path, I have .explore/repos, which is the local cache for repos that I can explore. You can see the cache contents by running this command. It tells you to list the current repositories before deciding which to use. I even call out that certain hosts support skill injection here. Otherwise, it should run this script to find what's there. Then it says, check whether the repo is already there. If it's not present, clone it, then explore it. Relatively simple. You might be seeing the first thing that Claude Code does that every other harness doesn't that's really nice. The current cache contents section. If the harness is capable, it will immediately make this directory if it doesn't already exist, and then list its contents. This skips a whole step that the model has to do. And if every other harness supported this, I would be able to write the skill entirely differently. I would just open with the listing of the content, and then I would say right below, if the repo you want is in this directory, just go there. If not, clone it there. It would make this skill half the length, and it would be meaningfully more reliable and resilient. But instead, I have to write it in two different ways. One where Claude Code gets these cool features, and one where every other harness, including Codex, Pi, and more, don't. Thankfully, there's a Pi extension that does this, and I think Open Code is starting to introduce this as well. But this is a feature that Claude Code does really well that I think people are too hesitant to introduce. There are real risks with how much people just arbitrarily install skills, that the skill could just arbitrarily execute code. We already deal with that with NPM, guys. Get over your fucking selves. This is totally fine. If anything, it's better because the code is in here to be audited by an LLM. It doesn't actually fucking auto run. Okay, it does kind of auto run once it's installed, but like you get the idea. This is not as unsafe as half the shit we do with NPM. It's totally fine. And this is not a new thing for me to call out. 2 months ago, I already did call this out, and I said that I want other things to be supportive of it, like Codex CLI, Pi, Cursor, etc. I like this pattern a lot. It is genuinely really good, and it's one of those things that should be part of the skills standard, but apparently just isn't. Some part of me that's frustrated about Anthropic wants to complain that they are moving too far away from the standard, but I'm not going to, because the standard should move. The standard should improve. We should take opportunities to do things better, and this is a thing that Claude Code does better than every other harness right now. So we should all go embrace that. And for those looking for the Pi skill, Joel made it, joelhook/Pi skill interpolation. Joel's a legend. Apparently our friend Mario did not like it though, because it was not secure. So know that as well going in. But that is the nature of this. It's arbitrary execution, but like it's not that big a deal. I think people are overreacting. And to their credit, Anthropic did also invent skills. So I think it's totally fair for them to do stuff like this. I wish other harnesses would embrace the flexibility that Claude Code skills have. Next, I want to talk about the CLAUDE.md for a bit. I have issues here, in particular that the CLAUDE.md and agent.md are competing standards where everything uses the agent.md except for Claude, which insists that it has a special file. I've come around to that a bit because Claude needs different instructions than other things do. It's annoying when I'm using Claude models in Open Code or Pi, but I have come around to some of the cool things you could do in the CLAUDE.md. I will highly recommend that you don't run their /init command. It's pretty bad. They have a new interactive version, but your CLAUDE.md should be handwritten. The thing I want to call out that I think is genuinely really cool is importing additional files. Markdown doesn't have an import standard because Markdown's not really a standard. It's a vague vibe at best. So Claude has a solution. CLAUDE.md files can import additional files using @path/to/import syntax. Imported files are expanded and loaded into context at launch alongside the CLAUDE.md that references them. Both relative and absolute paths are allowed. Relative paths resolve relative to the file containing the import, not the working directory. Imported files can recursively import other files with a maximum depth of 4 hops. So if you want to intentionally include things like the README package JSON, etc., you can just tag them in. This also means you can do a very convenient thing for those of us who are annoyed that the agent.md and CLAUDE.md are different. Watch this. @agents.md. Now my CLAUDE.md is my agents.md. Not with a symlink, not with some weird bullshit. It just is. But more importantly, if I do notice Claude doing some bullshit that my other models aren't, I can put additional stuff here just for Claude. So now I have the full content of my agent.md as well as my special Claude stuff just in the Claude file without having to do any weird symlinking or managing 2 different files. It works. It's good. And if you have other docs in your repo that are useful to the model, you can tag that in here as well. This is a really nice pattern, especially because it works with things other than Markdown, and I wish more things would copy it. The problem is that agents.md has become the standard. It's the thing everything uses. So if I do this in agents.md and it's supported by Codex, it might not be supported by 5 other things I use. So by having the CLAUDE.md be Anthropic special thing, they're able to do stuff like this. They also have a nice override pattern that I actually quite like with Claude.local.md. If you add this to your global git ignore, which I would recommend, I'm probably going to go do that myself, it allows you to have specific instructions for how you want to work that will not affect the rest of your team. I do love that they have this as a separate thing that allows me to add my preferences without affecting you and how you work. It gets kind of rough in this way where when one person wants one CLAUDE.md and somebody else wants another, Git doesn't resolve that well. This does. This is a good thing that Anthropic has that, as far as I know, none of the other harnesses do. I like this. While I was reading these docs to get this information, I found another really cool feature I didn't know about, which is launching sessions from links. They actually have their own HTTP code here, claude-cli:// that allows you to open things in Claude CLI. So you can have a page that someone makes that has a bunch of links in it to trigger Claude CLI. Apparently, Codex also has deep links, which is very, very nice. Cool to see. Does this work with app? The Codex app registers the Codex deep link. Oh, cool. That's actually really nice. That opens an app. Good shit. I like that. I might even add this to my skill for making HTML plans, where it has suggestions on how to kick off the job. And I can click the Claude CLI link in that HTML page, and it will just open up the terminal automatically. That's actually really cool. It does lead into the idea that your computer that you do work on is the same computer that your Claude Code runs on, which honestly hasn't been the best experience for me, even just for performance reasons. I've really enjoyed running Claude Code on other computers on my network, which this will not work for. But if you are just using one computer with all of your stuff, this is actually a really cool pattern. If you combine this with HTML planning, you can make some really cool UX with this. It even lets you pass the working directory and a GitHub repo, which will be resolved automatically by Claude Code if it's seen it before. If it doesn't, then it will make the session in your home directory instead. Interesting. So far, everything we've talked about isn't actually inside of Claude Code. It's just features it supports. But I want to hop into Claude Code itself and show off some things that I actually find quite nice. In order to show the first one, I need to kick off some work. So I'm going to do that. Do a quick audit of this work to make sure it's in a good state. Then commit, push, and make a PR. Cool. So I now have Mythos taking work it just did to go make a PR for it. But one of the really nice things Claude Code has that I haven't seen anyone else do is a special command /by the way, which lets you ask a quick side question without interrupting the main conversation. Can you tell me a bit about the performance for backups? And now I have a separate chat inside of this chat going while it's still doing the work that I told it to do. Apparently, Codex has /side, which is really cool as well. I'm pumped that other things are doing this now. But when I found this feature, it was the only one that had it. Super nice to just run a thing like this separately. Cool, and here we have the info on the performance. And while that was running, we got a bunch of sub-agents queued up to explore. More cool things that Anthropic was first to, but a lot of other stuff now has, is the ability to navigate through different sub-agents it spun up. This isn't the coolest implementation of it, though. The coolest implementation by far is workflows, and nothing else has gone quite as far as Anthropic has here. One other little thing, this is just one I've been using a lot because I've been stuck in the CLI more. Work trees are not my favorite way to deal with stuff, but for the ephemeral work where I spin up, do it, file a PR, and then drop it forever, having a -- work tree that actually behaves properly is really nice. Now I have the repo I was in, but in a sub-work tree in the .claude/work trees, which has since been git ignored. This pattern's actually been very nice for me, and I've been enjoying it, to just quickly spin up a work tree on some random idea I have. But what I want to show off is workflows. There's a couple ways to trigger a workflow. The easiest is to just tell the model to do it. The most expensive and most reliable option, though, is Ultra Code. As grotesque as that purple gradient it is, I do often use it to maximize my utilization of my sub. That said, I'm trying now to use high and xhigh directly more and just tell it to do a workflow. I'm going to voice the text because I'm lazy and want to just explain what I'm doing here at the same time. So let's do that. I want to audit the open PRs on this project and figure out what their status is. Which ones have been trumped, which ones don't need to be left open anymore because similar work has been merged, which ones are ready to go, and which ones need a little more before they're worth pushing over the finish line. I want to use a workflow to break up all of this work. Before you run the workflow, please output the code you're going to use to run it so that we can read through it together. The last line of there is probably my favorite part because workflows aren't just a bunch of tool calls the agent can do. They've fully embraced code mode, which is when you don't just tell the LLM to spit out text to trigger specific stuff and keep all of this stuff in its own memory. You let the agent write code to do a thing instead. Instead of having all your MCP servers that flood you with thousands of rows from your database, you can just have it write code to call the MCP server, get those 1,000 rows, and then filter it programmatically before it ever makes its way into the context window. While this is running, I want to point out how I'm running Claude Code because I'm not using the standard UI. I was an early mover to their full screen mode, which is using the alt screen rendering technique in the terminal. So instead of doing weird regexes to replace text in the scroll back history in the buffer, which is how a lot of these terminal apps work, it instead takes over the full terminal. So when I scroll up, I can't scroll to before I ran Claude Code. And when I close it, it fully closes and restores my old terminal view. So if I I don't know, LSA here. I have all this stuff. It's my custom command so I don't leak. I run Claude here, and now it's full screen. And when I close it, I go back to the terminal. That's because I'm using the full screen mode or the flickerless renderer. I found it pretty good. I would recommend switching to it if you're okay with not having traditional scroll buffer. It does get a little annoying when you're SSHing with tmux, but I just told my agent to go figure that out and fix it. And now I have fully working scroll in tmux over SSH, which has been a lifesaver. Apparently, you can turn this on by running /TUI full screen in Claude Code. But you can also do Claude Code no flicker equals 1 as an environment variable. That's how I have it set. We now have the workflow written. So here is what a workflow actually is. If you're not familiar, the point of a workflow is to take a bunch of work and break it up into groups of sub-agents that have different system prompts, different roles, different things they are working on. It's not just like, okay, let's have 6 things go off and look at this stuff. It's a staged workflow that has different steps along the way. So I'm just gonna tell it this looks good, run it. Be cautious when you tell it to run a workflow, though, because these burn tokens. By default, workflows use up to 8 agents in parallel, and it will constantly be spinning up new ones as previous work is finished. I'm going to wait till this actually starts running so I can open up the workflow and show you. Here we are. Once a workflow is running, you can go look at it here, and it currently has 15 agents it queued, one for every single one of the PRs that is currently open, because that's what I asked it to do, to audit the PRs. Each time it audits one of those PRs, it will decide whether or not it needs to throw that PR over to this new rule phase. And then after, there's a third verify phase. It doesn't even necessarily go through the phases in order. It just sets up these sub-agents to find some information and then decide if it should go through additional phases or not. It's a fully dynamic step-by-step workflow based on what you're asking for. It does burn usage like fucking mad, though. So know that going in. So we're at 9% used right now, and in not much time that will bump. Yep, it's already up to 10. And if I refresh again in a minute, it'll be at like 12 or 14. From my testing, when I had a workflow going, just one workflow with those 8 like parallel threads, it was costing about $100 every 10 minutes. Yeah, no going in workflows are expensive with Fable specifically, but if you use them with cheaper models, or you even tell Fable to orchestrate using Sonnet and Opus instead, you can make the usage here way less aggressive. But just those 2 sentences I said there were enough for it to go up to 12%. So use with caution. But I want to read through the code it wrote for the workflow, because it's one of the things I think is coolest about it. This is going to sound contradictory, so hear me out. You can never be more dynamic than code. I know that sounds crazy because code is code. It does what it says. But when the agent can write code, it is effectively building its own custom feature every time it does a workflow. If we were to build workflows as like a core feature that the agent just calls, it would have to be structured such that you tell the model, okay, here are the different phases you can do. Here's how you structure it. Here's where you put prompts, and we'll go spin up the rest. But when you tell it to write code, it's now able to structure it however the fuck it wants. And it takes advantage of that. I've seen Fable write workflows that just weren't compatible. Some of them weren't even valid JS because it's trying so hard to push the limits of what this feature can do, which I do actually think is kind of cool. So it starts with this meta export, which is the name of the workflow, open PR audit, says what it's going to do, audit all 15 open PRs, and it has 3 phases it defines. One is audit, which is detailed as 1 read-only agent per PR. Then the rule is to pick a winner inside of each overlapping cluster, and then verify, which is 1 adversarial checker per disposition. So every time it finds a thing it's not sure about, it will verify that here. And here are all of the PRs. This is code that isn't actually being used directly for the workflow. It's not exported. It just has this here for its own usage. This is all info it got from probably running the GitHub CLI getting this data and then putting it into this JS file. As each PR here says what the title is, whether or not it's a draft, whether or not it's mergeable, and when it was updated. Whether or not it's mergeable is like if it's conflicting or not, which is cool that it got that data ahead of time so the agents aren't stuck figuring that out for each of themselves. Then we have by number, which is a mapping of all of the data here so that it's an object that is number, key, data, value, just to make it easier to go through. Then it actually pulled some stuff from memory because I've done this specific audit before. So here it had priors where PR35 won in a tournament against 37 and 39. PR37 lost that same tournament. PR39 superseded 35 and 37, but it was empirically refuted, all caps refuted. Chimera, reference.md documents a return type that code doesn't produce. 2 disjointing storage runtimes, 4 or 5 smoke functions dead. Hosted, yeah, it really did not like that PR. That PR was written by 5.5, so Fable, it's funny. Opus 4.8 glazed the shit out of GPT code. Fable hates GPT code. It's actually really interesting how different they are in this way. I would say that this is probably the single area I've seen Fable differ the most from Opus. Opus loved OpenAI code. Fable hates it. And then it has the main logs. This is things that have recently merged, so it has this as a reference. And then it is best to group all the different clusters of PRs that are related. So all of these have to do with files. All of these have to do with whitelisting. All of these are auth brokers. The rest are all unique. Cool that they did that for me. Dispositions, these are all the different states it can be in. The audit schema, this is how it wants the audit to return when the model is done. The ruling schema, this is for the ruler verifier layer. And then we have the verdict schema, the audit prompt, which is the prompt that is dynamically generated because it's a function that takes in a PR. It also uses the today definition so that the model knows what today is without having to potentially destroy its context by putting that in the system prompt. It's actually, I haven't read one of these in full before. This is super cool. This whole thing here actually is just a function that returns a string. It's a template string generator that you pass a PR to that has number, title, branch, all of this stuff to give that to the model as a prompt because, again, it's doing all of this dynamically on the fly, which is super cool. Here it even has a dynamic ternary where it puts different context based on whether or not there are priors for this PR. It has a different prompt for ruling, which is deciding whether or not this thing should be used or not, and then a verify prompt. You're an adversarial verifier in the Lakebed repo. Read only, origin already fetched, do not fetch, check out, or modify. It knows how to prompt Claude. Historically, I didn't feel like models knew how to prompt themselves. Fable has pushed me way over the line here. Fable is great at prompting Anthropic models. It knows all the ways they screw up and tells them not to ahead of time. The proposed disposition for PR is the data that it fetched from the other agents. Try to refute this using actual repo state. The GitHub PR view diff checks, git logs, close superseded, close stale, yada, yada. It's a decent prompt. And then we have the results where they call pipeline, which is their magic global helper, as clusters, which are the groups that we talked about before, an async function for auditing every PR member. That's the first stage. And stage 2 is the next section. Stage 3 is the end part. But you define this all in a pipeline that takes the clusters, which is the data as the first argument, and then the functions to define the subjobs and the subruns for all of these other subagents. It's fucking cool. It wrote 240 lines of code that is entirely throwaway, that is only going to be executed ever once to trigger this workflow. That's fucking awesome. Although I will admit, with Fable, that is also expensive. We are now up to 24% used in the time that I read that. Another 12% of my $200 a month 5-hour window. When you see everybody talking about agent loops and letting the agent prompt itself, this is a phenomenal example of it. Should you go use this and burn all of your usage yourself? Maybe. But at the very least, you should look at this and learn from it, realizing that this is where you get really crazy powers with models when you let them write their own code to do additional sub-prompting, where code isn't just the output of a model. Code is a step between model runs. Genuinely really cool. And it's got me thinking a lot more deeply about how to use these things as well, if I'm being honest with y'all. On the topic of usage limits, though, I'm burning through them pretty fast. That's why I now have to use multiple accounts. Let's say I want to reduce my usage on this account right now. If I was near the end and I was scared, I'd have a lot of reasons I'd want to do that. We have this workflow already running, so it's going to keep going. But a problem I've had is that when your usage limit gets hit, this run can stop, and it's really hard to recover it if possible at all. But what you can do to handle this is make sure you switch accounts before you get there. But Theo, isn't that going to screw up the run? Isn't that going to break your current stuff? Not from my experience. As I mentioned, I have that workflow running right now, and I'm going to switch accounts. I have to hide myself doing this, but I'll show you. I'm going to click authorize, login successful. And again, this agent was already running, but now all of its usage is going to be routed to this other account. So even though I already had a run going, it will start future turns on the other account's auth, because every time it does a tool call, a new API request is made. And once that happens, the new auth is used. So it will keep using this in a given generation, but when it runs another command, it reads additional data, it does anything that requires execution of code, a new API request will be made, and that one will go through your other auth. This is awesome and really abusable. While I was recording this, a fun announcement went live that apparently Anthropic is no longer letting anyone use Fable because the US government told them to suspend Fable and Mythos access for foreign actors. That is unprecedented. I have a couple more features I want to show off really quick before I forget. One that a lot of other things have, but I've actually found myself liking the implementation in Claude Code quite a bit, is branch as well as rewind. Rewind I actually use a ton, because if I accidentally send a prompt or get something wrong, I will use it to go back 1 or 2 steps. I do have an issue with it, which is that if you do this erroneously, fast forwarding is nearly impossible. So be careful with rewind, but when you accidentally send something and want to go back, it is very nice. /branch is the better option for when you want to go do something else or take the history you have now and go somewhere else with it. It's very, very nice. Thankful more things are starting to add that. I definitely recommend it. One more that a lot of people told me to talk about, which I haven't used yet, but I've heard really good things, so I'm going to try it here, is remote control. It's a built-in feature where I can type /remote control. So now I've given the ability for this Claude Code instance on my real computer to be controlled through Claude.ai, the website, or from my phone using the Claude app. Yeah, I just went to Claude on my phone. I had to go to Claude Code, of course, but here you probably can't see great, and I'm not going to do anything to fix that. I can click Audit, Open PRs, and Workflow Planning. And this is the exact run that is going on my computer right now. And it just hit a Python decoding error with some of the JSON that it got back as a response. Fascinating. Cool, though. I have that on my phone now. I actually do really like that. I will probably use that more when I'm running a bunch of shit and then out on the go. I wish they had a better, proper remote control, the whole instance feature like Codex does, but it's a quick way to just throw the session externally so you can do it from other things. It's kind of cool. I think that's all I have to say here, though. This is a weird reflective experience for me. There's a lot of things in Claude Code that are good. I went out of my way to not talk about the bad here, but I might have to in the future. So if you want me to do a video where I tear apart all of the things that Claude Code does wrong, let me know in the comments. Hope you enjoyed this one. I need to go crash out about Fable being taken away from me. I am not excited to do that, but until next time, peace nerds.